What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you so much for all your support and joy over the last few weeks. I really appreciate all of you listening in and tuning in. And thank you once again for joining me for another very special episode with another member of the GSA contingent, which is, of course, the incredible Chris Palmer. I've had the genuine pleasure of learning from Chris since September on my course, and it's like a tidal wave of information about voice. I've absorbed all of it, and I've learned just so much, from voice management to Tai Chi to yoga to how to shout and scream safely, and also just to really enjoy working with the voice and to really learn from someone who's been there and done that, and continues to grow as a teacher and as a person. And I'm so thrilled that she is with me here today. So let's take a moment to introduce Chris herself. So Chris graduated from the Royce Buford College of Speech and Drama, specializing in educative theatre, then completing her training in an MA course in advanced voice studies at the Central School of Speech and Drama. She's worked as a vocal coach on numerous shows, including West End production of Mamma Mia, and has taught at many leading drama schools. Chris has increased her departments to cover the world of voiceovers and radio at GSA, including winning the BBC Carlton Hobbs competition in 2011. She has coached in Norway and Geneva for the World Economic Forum and Global Fellowship, and was communications examiner for Royal College of Surgeons. Chris has published articles for VASTA, that's BASTA, and BVA, and her research as course leader on GSA's groundbreaking MA Practice of Voice and Singing course, and has led to wider readership in the training of singing and spoken voice. If you want to read more about Chris's work, she is the author of two amazing books, one of which is called A Suitable Vehicle for Actor Training, published by the Hopkins Quarterly in 2017, and most recently, Voice and Speech for Musical Theatre, published by Methuen Drama in 2019, where she takes you through, very interestingly, the science behind the voice, the biology, how to maintain it, and the process of how it creates its sound. And very, very deservedly, Chris is now head of voice at GSA. And on top of all that, she is also trained in British Sign Language, and I've written that twice, author of Voice and Speech, published by Methuen Drama in 2019, an amazing book. And so it's a really genuine pleasure to be speaking to someone with a wealth of experience. And of course, she's worked with world leaders as well in Geneva, working from actors to world leaders to all kinds of people who use their voice, no matter what it is. So yeah, wow, what a wealth of experience you have, Chris.
Gosh, you make me sound so much better than I really am, Ollie.
You don't be so hard. It's great. It's great. You must be really proud of all that.
Gosh, I suppose when you think back, it does feel like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But actually, it's where your performance or your voice journey just takes you, and you don't. Normally I say yes to most things, so I never know where my journey's going to actually take me, really. So so you mentioned Geneva. My gosh, that feels like a long time ago. It was working with the World Economic Forum, teaching voice to international politicians. So that's a different vehicle in itself to teaching actors. But,
how does it compare working with world leaders to actors? Is there like a similarity in the training, or is there kind of a difference?
There's a similarity in the mechanics of what it is that you're doing, like the voice training. Whereas, but actually most of the politicians, they actually know their content very well. And sometimes it might be to do with maybe exploring empathy towards the people that are going to be listening to them, or perhaps a more harder approach, depending on the content of what needs to be said and how it needs to be approached. So they are the clients, and it depends what the client wants and what the purpose is. So that's the main area that I work with, and what they want is how to deliver sometimes quite difficult information in a way that has longevity and really increases their power, if you like. And I don't mean vocal power, I mean the message behind what needs to be said. But I would advocate that that's no different really from actors, really. As lawyers, teaching lawyers, or it all actually often feels the same kind of work. It's just where the vehicle is or who the audience are.
I suppose you could teach Boris a trick or two about that sort of thing. But
no comment.
No comment. Yeah, I think you mentioned, I think in one of our classes, he uses the directness a lot. I don't want to talk about Boris too much, but yeah, he uses the directness of the voice quite well. So everything he says sounds authoritative, and he wants to make it sound as believable as possible. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's what he tries to do. Sometimes he speaks before he thinks. That might be something that he could probably take some time to get himself grounded and really take the time to measure what's being said. Because sometimes we're often very hard on politicians, but they all are often asked questions that are completely, and they have to respond instantly, whereas actors don't. You're in that moment. You don't really, unless you're being interviewed, you don't really have to be spontaneous in what it is that you're verbalizing. So I take my hat off to all politicians, actually.
There was a courage and a charisma there to sort of stand in front of the public and just have this, I suppose, not inner strength and then going into vocal strength in terms of what they're trying to deliver in a way. But
it's each politician from each party and persuasion right across the spectrum. They all care about what they believe in, and sometimes my job is to help them, and I don't distinguish between each politician. And after that, I won't say any more about that one.
And let's move on. Apologies.
No names.
No names. I was going to ask you about names, but actually it's probably not a good idea. But so let's shoot right back to the beginning. So your first inspiration or first need and desire to work with the voice, where did that come from?
Gosh, if I think right back, I'd been a child singer. So I was doing pubs and clubs as a child singer, actually.
Okay.
And then I gave it up. My dad actually got throat cancer.
Oh,
so that's sorry. Actually where the thought of it, and he had to relearn to speak because they pinned back some elements of his tongue. So he had to relearn to speak. And that's where the beginnings of the fascination of voice work came to me, but I didn't really explore it. I didn't go down the speech and language therapy route because I was still quite interested in performing. And then I went to drama school and I performed quite a bit. And but I was one of those actors that always had to beaver away at the craft. I couldn't just sort of turn up after a cigarette and a coffee and just switch it on. I've never been like that. Because I could always feel the difference when my voice was warmed up and when it wasn't. And for me, unless it was truly warmed up, I didn't feel that I was really giving a proper performance. And I was in a show which ran for a year, and it was based on an American show called The Wedding. I think it's called The Wedding in Chicago, and it was running for about 25, 30 years. And then Robert McIntosh, who's Cameron McIntosh's brother, he produced this show called Joey and Gina's Wedding, and there were some quite well-known people in it. And I was just the singer in the band, and I would cover about 7 different roles. And that show went on for a year, and most of it, 70% of it was unscripted. It was improvised, and 30% of it was scripted. So you had to do certain things at certain points. But a lot of the time, there was a lot of improv. And as a consequence, when you're improvising, you tend to talk far more. You're doing so much more than a scripted performance. And that was really tiring out my voice. And so I kind of recognized that once we finished that show, which ran for a year, I needed to sort of look at things in a kind of new way. And then a friend of mine who's a vocal coach, who trained as a vocal coach, and is very well known in the industry, he suggested, why not try and be a voice coach? So I thought, I'll give it a go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can get in. Fingers crossed. So I did. I got in, and I sort of, in my naivety, I thought that I would probably switch between being an accent coach and still perform. That was my reasoning behind it. But very quickly I was getting so much work, and in fact I was offered heads of voice at 3 different places at the same time, and I kind of had to go, ooh, this is interesting. That's not what I expected at all. And that's what I mean about the kind of offers that come to you that you think, oh, well, I better go in this direction. So it's a 2-pronged approach, really. It was my own voice in performance, but also my father's cancer of the throat and tongue that kind of made these kind of 2 elements, if you like, of my life become this new path that I decided to follow. So I no longer perform.
Wow.
I look after performers.
I'm sure the performer is still very much alive inside you, I would think. But so how would you obviously you're still, all of us are on this journey of life every day, but your journey with the voice, I suppose, specifically as a voice teacher to date, how would you describe it? What's really stood out for you over sort of discovering and working with the voice and working with all kinds of different people? What sort of experiences have made you gone, wow, I wasn't expecting that?
I think, it's always about that self-reflection, isn't it? So you learn, when I went to Central and I learned sort of the guiding fundamentals, the guiding principles of voice teaching from a wonderful teacher called David Carey. He I'd started that journey of voice teaching, but for me, I suppose I was still learning to be a teacher at that point, and I wasn't. So I had all these skills, and I wanted to kind of throw them at people, but it was. It took a long time for me to recognize that I needed to pull back, actually, and look at myself, rather than just feeding students lots of stuff. I needed to actually look at my own craft. And so I suppose it was actually other things that led me to the voice teacher I am today. And that would be things like yin yoga, training to be a yin yoga teacher, and Tai Chi. And in fact, David Carey introduced me to the beginnings of Tai Chi many years ago. And from that, I sort of explored, I guess, moving meditation in voice work, and that which led to introducing it into my practice. And the same would apply with yin yoga. One of the things about me, Ollie, and you probably know it because of my style of teaching, is that I'm quite an adrenalized person. I've got a lot of energy, but sometimes that can be detrimental, and I'm aware of that, not only in myself but also with others. And so the yin-like quality of yoga and the moving meditation of Tai Chi calm me down. And I recognize myself in lots of students, and that kind of high energy and that high adrenaline, especially when you've come from one class to another, or you're hyped, or students are hyped up. So for me, I recognize that energy, and which is why I kind of brought this into my practice, this kind of calming way of working before you begin the true work. So it's sort of, so they were like wow moments for me, bringing the yin yoga and the Tai Chi into my practice. And also the work of Roy Hart, which is under the guidance of Bernadette O'Brien, that I did some training at Rose Bruford many years ago. But it sort of stayed with me. Those kind of practices where you're able to be creative and exploratory without defining a right and wrong. So it was quite extreme, some of that work, but that led me to think, well, it's possible to take a student on a journey. So whenever I'm learning something new, I'm always thinking, well, how could I use this? That's always my thing. How can I use it for my practice? So I'm about to do a 2-week viewpoints training, so that I can help students. One, it's for me, but two, it's also for how can I, because I've done viewpoints training years ago as an actor, but it's nice to look at it from a different with a different head on. And think, right, okay, how could it help me now to help students, and also explore my knowledge even further.
That's fascinating. I think you mentioned there, because the yin yoga and the Tai Chi, which you taught us very well at sort of last year. Sort of yin yoga, I just wanted to sort of just go into that and how specifically they help the voice. Those two practices help the voice. So with yin yoga, I mean, you took us on a few of those immersive workshops of yin yoga, and it was so, it was quite an amazing experience in a way. It was really, really lovely. So the question in my head right now is what separates that from kind of other forms of yoga in a way, and how does it help with the voice? And because it's more towards breath support, isn't it, with yin yoga? Because it's a very kind of, it's all about supporting the breath and making it stronger and making you.
There's a stillness to yin yoga that yang yoga doesn't have. So yang yoga would be Ashtanga yoga or hot yoga or Iyengar yoga, where there's movement, where it's flowy, it moves, and it's often standing. Most of the positions are standing, whereas yin yoga is all floor-based. It's all on the floor, and you spend longer in the poses, between 6 and 8 minutes in one pose. So what you're trying to do is relax the body in what can sometimes be an uncomfortable or challenging position in order to truly let go. So that's letting go of the fascia, the connective tissue, to completely release. Because for me, the voice is often bound by tension that we create in ourselves. So it could be shoulder tension, neck tension, facial tension, stomach and core strength tension. So by being on the floor, you're completely relaxing your body in positions that you might not necessarily always find comfortable, like hip openers. And as a consequence of that, you're really truly letting go of some of these quite deep-rooted tension. And by releasing that, you're allowing the power of the voice to drop, which affects the breath, which ultimately affects the sound. So that's why I spend the odd time, the odd class, just working on the yin yoga, really.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I always find that after yin yoga, I always find this kind of release in a way, and it's not just like vocal release; it's a whole body kind of, and you feel free when you move now, and I think that helps. If you move freely in the body, then the voice can operate freely as well.
Absolutely. We call a lot of our modules embodied voice and movement, but actually the voice isn't just this tiny thing here, it's the whole body. And if the body is unbalanced in some way or has some sort of tension, then it's going to manifest itself somehow within the quality of the voice. So that's the aim, It's not, I'm not always achieving it. That includes me as well as a student. So I'm not always achieving it, but hopefully these little sprinkles of sessions might do for some students what it did for me, you know, kind of opening up the door to various possibilities. And they are, so my work is often inspired by, so I am not even though I do practice and teach yin yoga, within my classwork, it's not the true form, because the true form, one is completely still and one doesn't make sound. But of course, in my classes, I like to make sound. And the same with the Tai Chi. It's not true Tai Chi. My master would have a fit. But it's inspired by. So I've taken some of the movements in isolation and created a form or a structure.
Yeah. So I didn't know that. So all the times you've been doing gathering the chi and stroke the camel's back and push dragon.
Horse's back. Horse's back.
Oh God, yeah. Sorry.
There's no camel.
That'd be very much like that. Oh God, that'd be bad. But so part that one, wherever that was, and push dragon away. I got that one right. But
they are all individual movements.
Yeah.
They are all individual proper Tai Chi movements. But they would be done in sequence with other areas in a long form, you know, in a completely different, you know. And of course, again, we wouldn't make sound. You know, we wouldn't make sound in that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how because Tai Chi is a martial art, and and how that can affect the voice as well. I'm reminded of I spoke to someone on this podcast about the work of Yao Faber, and how her practice is all about the visceral quality that you bring to a performance. So the emotions are kept in the body. It's not just all up here in the head. It's everywhere. And if you're playing a character with this kind of smoothness, then I suppose yin yoga would be a very good thing to be practicing between.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because you don't know, the body has pain and suffering and etched on our bodies, isn't, you know, and actually by releasing, sometimes we release some sort of emotion, you know, and the same with Tai Chi, you know, it's a stress reduction. So for me, it's good for vocal practice. Yeah.
And speaking of vocal practice, that brings me on to another topic I want to talk to you today. I remember the very first session we had with you, you sort of gave us a rundown of what to avoid when you're looking after your voice, you know, avoid like particular products or particular sweets in a way to sort of affect, because I've heard strepsils are a big no-no for voice work and stuff. I don't know, I just heard that from somewhere. And so what are some of the absolute no-nos of voice care? In a way, what should you be avoiding if you want
I think it depends on, I think it does depend on the individual. So it's knowing your body and your own voice, knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you. But you know, personally, if I were going to record something, I wouldn't be having red wine the night before because of the tannins in the wine. I would also probably reduce my dairy products because I know for me, they produce a bit more phlegm on the folds. So it's knowing what's right. You know, I would use apples before recording because they really help with acidity in reducing and give a brighter quality to the voice. You know, water at room temperature, not too hot, not too cold, you know, those sorts of things. But I would never sort of say you shouldn't do this. I think it's really up to the individual. And it's the same with, the only thing I would say is that any throat spray or sweets that have a numbing effect on the voice. I personally, I don't like sugary sweets because sugar, in the instance that you have them, one can feel a little bit more soothed, can't one? But immediately afterwards, you start actually tickling. The tickly cough often comes back. And that's often because of the sugar, the amount of sugar that's in those sweets, which is not good because obviously all it's going to do is reproduce more phlegm, making you cough and tickle even more. And the same with the numbing things, you know. Personally, I wouldn't use anything that numbs the voice. And I won't name any products. But I find, so I think if you are numbing your voice in any way, you are in danger of us thinking that your voice is okay to do a certain thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit like having some sort of injection to numb some sort of pain in your leg and then going off and doing a marathon. For me, that equates to the same thing. To have anything that numbs the vocal folds, something's not quite right if you need to do that. And I would sort of say, rest, don't. That would be my advice. I'm not an advocate of taking anything that's going to cause anyone to reach beyond their capabilities when they're not feeling too well.
Yeah, so I think things like vocal zones and like throat tea and stuff like that, that's yes or no?
I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't. I think again, they have sort of numbing qualities that may be helpful if you weren't performing, that may be really helpful. But if you've got to then immediately go on stage, then you're thinking that your voice can do things that it really can't do. It's just in a numbing state. So I would say that would be a no-no for me.
A big no-no. And so because there's a thing where some famous people like Adele, for example, have had surgery on their vocal cords because they have vocal cysts in a way. And I think the famous case of Julie Andrews had operation on there, and she sadly lost her singing voice entirely, and she couldn't do it again. Where do cysts come from, and is there a way of avoiding them, or is it something that's kind of just happens in a way?
They're nodules, so they're like a little hard blister that happens. So when the vocal folds come together for speech and they move and oscillate, like this, if vocal fold adduction is not happening smoothly enough, so but they're glottalizing quite hard, that's what happens, is a little tiny blister is formed. And if that blister becomes too hard, then often a layer has to be taken away. But it means that the vocal folds are no longer coming together as cleanly as they once were. So that would mean a re-education of how to use the voice more safely. And obviously that's part of what we do in drama schools, is to train you to use your voice as safely as possible so that you have a long career and that you're not doing this one-hit big thing that can cause you problems down the line, and which ultimately means changing how you approach your voice and the work, the performance that you do, whether it's singing differently or speaking differently. There are certain accents that have that. My natural accent, as I've talked to people about it before, is Cockney London, and it's not a healthy. It can sound right down there. First of all, that's the first thing. It drops right down there, so it's a lower note. And a lot of glottalization. So it's not how I get tired very quickly, and I'm aware of it. If I weren't a performer, it wouldn't matter. If I weren't working in this industry or helping others to use their voices as safely as possible, it really wouldn't matter. But I'm aware of it. When I'm with family, I have to really modify how I sound and speak because I'm so conscious of my voice, not having a voice afterwards.
Walk away, do some like belly bowl or what was that, ocean breathing you taught us about as well. Oh, wait, I need to get back to normal. Not normal. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Sorry.
but it is strange, you know, when we have family gatherings, and it's lovely, but I'm always very, very tired. But that's because I'm also quite an adrenalized person, and I want to see everyone, you know, you know, and I over push. You know, I'll go back to my natural, primitive self, my authentic self. You know, I try to modify that authenticity in order to remain healthy.
Yeah,
really.
Well, it's good to hear. It's good to hear people's own sounds in a way. So be proud of your Cockney roots. And
I am.
Yeah. It's funny because you've got actors like Danny Dyer is out there at the moment. He's got a very, very rich Cockney sounds to him, but because he was born with it and it's natural, even though it contains a lot of glottal in a way, but he naturally, but because he's kind of a natural speaker and his vocal cords are sort of naturally probably adapted to all that glottal in a way from the back of the throat, do you think he won't have any problems with like shouting or screaming or anything like that? Safely, of course, but you know.
In all honesty, I don't know. I think it would depend. If he were in a long running show, as opposed to a TV thing, it might be very different. I actually don't know. It would be interesting if he were in a show to see him sort of like 200, 300 performances down the line and how he sounds. Because I think that's always the key. It's not the one-off, because the one-off we can get away with, or the two-offs, you know, or in a TV, it's very different. It's being live, and obviously that's what we're training people to do, is to have a long career, a long healthy career, and not just the immediacy of one job.
Yeah, that's good. Because I know he did the dumbwaiter a few years ago in town, when I think he only did it for about 6 weeks or so, or something like that. It'd be really interesting to see how his voice developed from week 1 to the end. In fact, from day 1 of rehearsals in a way up until this point. Good stuff. So that brings me on to a question actually from my brother. Actually, he's actually sort of wanted to throw this question out. He wanted to talk about the how to stop yourself from, I suppose, in performance or in rehearsal, but from like going too hard. Like he says, like, how do you avoid pushing too much, using too much air in a way, and how to sort of not go to it? Because I think I'm getting this right for the gist of his question, is that if he pushes too much, then that causes damage or can inflict damage in a way. So what's a good way of sort of not,
it's obviously going right. I'm with you. I think it's going back to the basic principles of breath support, belly bowl, breath support, and can you sustain your voice with your breath at the same time? You know, that's the aim, really, to really work it's all in that training. Sometimes when we are enthusiastic about a particular role or a particular massive amount of text, we tend to overcompensate.
We do.
And we do it through the voice, through our bodies. Some people do it through their bodies and some people do it through their voices. And we push. So we push, first of all, with our head thrusting forward, known as pigeon. So we tend to, we've got to try and obviously maintain a level of good posture that helps sustain that kind of breath support. In your brother's case, I would say that sometimes when we push too much air through, a good experiment to do is to put a candle in front of you and see if you can speak without moving the candle flame. Because if the flame is moving too much, then you are putting way too much breath over the top of it. So it's a really good little experiment to do. Is to try that, you know. And then move closer and closer to it. And because if the further away you are, is that breath really traveling too far and too hard? You know, so that's often a good way to try, a good experiment.
That's good. Yeah, hopefully he'll listen to this and be able to pick on that. So if a voice does become damaged in a way, and you know, not to the extent where you need surgery or anything like that, but if your vocal cords are really struggling, and if you essentially lose your voice in a way, and you suddenly have this husky sort of tone, what's the best way of kind of resting the voice? Is it simply just to not talk, or is it to have, you know, to try certain products, or like just have a cup of tea? What is it?
So no products are going to help, I don't think, with the damage that you might have inflicted on yourself. Are you talking about, like, say, a football match?
Yes.
You know, you've screamed once loudly and you think, oh, that hurt.
Unsafely.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
We've all done that. And in fact, every 4 years when the cup comes round, I do a little bit on safe screaming and safe shouting, and to do it a little bit more quietly. But like the impulse is very similar to what we were just talking about, which is that immediacy. We want to go for it.
Yes.
Yeah. And somehow we actually have to set up the body, set it up. The way I like to think of it is, if you watch a cat wanting to jump up, they take a moment to look at where they're going and to really get their body ready for the launch. And that's actually what we ought to be thinking about before we scream. You know, if a goal's coming up, or you know someone's running towards the goal, somehow we have to vocally, physically get ourselves set up for it. So maybe I'll be doing some safe screaming and safe shouting for football when it comes around again. Is it this year?
It is this year. It's
okay.
Bizarrely, it's in November and December this year, because it's over.
Oh right, okay, yes, that's right. So I guess I'll be doing some things on that. But normally that's a one-off, so it's a scream and you've hurt yourself, or shouted hard and you've hurt yourself, and that's in the short term it's absolutely fine. You just know not to go there again, you see, and sometimes it's quite useful as a guide to yourself to go, that's wrong, I should not do that. And then of course then you will need just to have some rest. And vocal rest is vocal rest. That means no talking for a day, not even quiet talking, not even whispering. It's just like one day, don't do anything, just one day.
Yeah.
Lots of swallowing, because we swallow between 800 and 2,000 times a day.
Wow.
So it's recognizing how much we might need to swallow a little bit more, do a little bit of sirening after a day or two, but gentle voice work, nothing that's going to. So if you're about to perform on stage, watch the football after you've performed, not just before you're about to go on.
No, not a good idea.
And I would say also set yourself up for a better scream, shout sort of feeling.
Yeah, that's good. It's funny how I could just get this image now of someone playing John Proctor and watching a football match beforehand. He's in for a rough night. That's actually good. It's funny, Hugh Jackman was talking about this a few years ago when he did the film of Les Mis, which record was not a fan of, and but I won't go into that. But he talked about how he went on vocal rest. Some days he wouldn't speak, and there's another story about this singer Alfie Boe, who, according to some people, said apparently he sleeps sitting up, so the voice stays in the right place, so it doesn't. It's
more to do with that's probably more to do with snoring and mouth opening.
Yeah.
So one of the things I advocate is sleeping with extra pillows if you've got a cold, especially a cough, because the cough, if you're lying perpendicular, is that the right? I'm terrible.
Yes.
If you're lying flat, completely flat, you're more likely to have your mouth open, which will dry out your throat, of course. And you don't produce as much saliva in the evening. You produce about 1.5 liters a day, but you're not really producing much because your tongue's not moving around. So you're not producing saliva. So with a mouth opener, you're more likely to snore. So of course, if you're upright, your mouth will automatically close. So so that would be the reason why. If you snore, it will have an effect on your voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. So sleeping upright or with an extra couple of pillows or on one side or the other, again, is really helpful. They can just help really.
Yeah. I said that to somebody and they said, "Oh, Ollie, that's a load of rubbish. What are you talking about?" It's like, but no, there is legs to this now, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, it's dependent on the person. If you're not a snorer, then you don't need to worry. You know, but if you know your voice and you know that you wake up in the morning with a very dry throat and it's quite chances are you probably have been snoring, and because you don't produce so much saliva of a night time, then you're less likely to you'll feel quite dry. That's why we get that kind of sour sort of breath in the morning, and we sound a little bit croaky. You know, that's the reasoning why, because it's dry mouth. You know.
I think Barbara says creak. Barbara Ward also at GSA, saying there's the creak in a way which sort of happens later on at night and first thing in the morning. It's just how to avoid that in a way. Yeah,
it's less to do with the positioning. It's more to do with keeping your mouth closed.
Yeah.
And breathing in and out through your nose, so that you know the air is filtered through your nose hairs.
Yeah. And use your voice properly, guys. That is great. So I think let's just talk about something. We also looked at, with yourself, we looked at Shakespeare in a way, and you broke down one of the choruses speeches from Henry V. Now enter a trajectory of a time. That one, fills the wide vessel of the universe in a way. Can you talk about your relationship to Shakespeare? As like, obviously you're very well adept at it. You know, you broke it down brilliantly for us. How has Shakespeare affected your relationship with voice in a way, because of the rhythm and the iambic pentameter and the line endings and, you know, various endings?
You know, before when I trained as an actor, I was a little bit afraid of Shakespeare. If I'm honest. Because I sort of thought, oh, it's so clever, I won't get it, I won't understand it, I won't get it. But actually,
I felt the same.
To be honest, so one of the exercises I did with you was a David Carey exercise, and it blew my mind. I mean, literally, sort of just looking at the text and repeated phrases or repeated words, alliteration, repetition, you know, assonance, antithesis. Once I simile and metaphor. Once I understood all of the way language works, by the time I'd done that about 5 times, I thought, oh, I actually half understand this. So it no longer gave me any fear. And then I started to look at some exercises. I think I did an exercise we did when we were training to be voice coaches. We went to the Royal Shakespeare Company, and we spent a couple of days there. And Sis Berry taught us some ways in. And again, it sort of like, it blew my mind. It was just little exercises that I sort of thought, gosh, this is really taking away the fear. I don't know what I was worried about. But I think that comes from school, actually. School is all about language. And if you don't have, if you've not been exposed to a wide variety of language, then Shakespeare is going to feel like it's nothing to do with you. And so for me, I feel my job now is to dispel the myths of the academia side of Shakespeare. That's my mission, because for me, in some ways, Shakespeare reminds me of Sid James from the Carry On films.
Explain.
Let me explain. only in the just that they are. It's all sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There's
pretty much, yeah.
You know, it's so much more visceral and literally, you know, in the moment, that I can't imagine people not understanding Shakespeare now. It feels like some of the comedy, and when I say that, I mean some of the comedy is more like Sid James. The tragedy is something else. The tragedies are something else. But you know, it for me, it feels like really descriptive, juicy language now. There should be no fear. But I do feel that Shakespeare has been somehow needs to be demystified further. You know. And the same applies to Greeks. You know, I love all the Greek dramas, the Greek tragedies, and in fact, I went and saw Kay Tempest's Philocrates. I think it was Philocrates at the National Theatre.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
And it was an amazing. For me, I love the Greeks, and I think if you love the Greeks, you'll love Shakespeare. You know, because I think they go hand in hand, and every, you know, Shakespeare will have known the classics, the Greek classics, and would refer to them. So actually, that was also my way in through Greeks.
And I think the more you hear Shakespeare, especially if you go to the Globe, especially, which is, by the way, is Jack's favorite place. Hi, Jack.
Yeah.
And just I was lucky enough to be a steward there over the summer of 2019 before COVID, and I was there probably about 3 or 4 times a week, you know, showing people to seats and stuff like that, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's voluntary, blah, blah, blah. But I got to listen to Shakespeare and just have it in my ear and stuff like that. And before I went, I was a bit like, I hadn't really read Shakespeare properly for a few years. And then I got there and I was like, first few shifts, I was like, people laughed. I was like, oh, I laugh as well. Okay, that's funny. But just following the crowd. But then as you sort of heard the text and stuff like that, I thought, oh, that's why it's funny. Oh, that's what he's on about. And and there's one moment, it was the opening paragraph for the Witch's Chant in the Scottish play, I'll say the Scottish play. And, you know, I remember reading that out because we did it for A-level. And I just remember getting to the end of that. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. And
that alliteration.
And I remember I was reading it and I just went, the whole class just felt a bit silent. I went, God, that is fucking awesome.
It's just full of alliteration. It's so, and that's what voice work does. I feel, you know, fair. It brings that kind of, that those fricatives so onto the front of the mouth that you think, well, how else can you say it? How else can you say them?
Yeah.
You know, it really allows you to play with your voice. Shakespeare does, especially.
Fair is foul. Foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. Yes, that's amazing. Someone was to try it for the first time. Yeah, that's a good one. So if someone was to say, sorry, I keep looking here, my phone keeps going off with all the questions on it. But with someone, if anyone's listening to this, who is particularly worried about tackling Shakespeare or looking at Shakespeare in school right now, or studying for A-level, or just wanting to get to know a little bit more, what would you recommend someone who's literally approaching it for the first time? And, you know, they have that, as you mentioned just now, the initial kind of, not reluctance away, that's not the right word, but the initial kind of unsettledness in a way to think, oh, I'm not going to understand this, or I'm reading all these big words, I don't know what they mean, I don't know what blank verse is, or verse, or iambic pentameter, or anything like that. But if anyone's listening right now to this, Chris, what would you, how would you encourage them to sort of tackle it head on for the very first time, and how to not to be afraid of the words, and that it is accessible?
I think I would get out audio, and I would listen to it, or watch a film of it, because I think to take a monologue or something out of context and try and read a play when you don't really understand it, I think is too hard for some people, and I know I found that quite hard. So I remember listening to audio recordings whilst following the text.
Yes.
And listening to the feel that was created through the words, and the moods that were created through the words. And as a consequence, somehow the words married what I was hearing. So I was able to sort of, and I remember when I was at drama school going through King Lear in that way. And I was literally lying in bed crying my eyes out, absolutely crying my eyes out, because I was, partly because I was understanding the text, but partly because I was so moved by King Lear and what was happening. And so it was like I was understanding through my ear. And for me, you know, voice work is about listening. so listening, really.
Yeah, because there's some fantastic again of Macbeth. I was Macbeth when we did Judi Dench and Ian McKellen back in, I think it was 1978, I think was that production, directed by Trevor Nunn. And another one I think is very good is listening to old recordings of John Gielgud doing Hamlet and stuff like that. I think the way he speaks verse is very, 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 not particular, but it's very accurate to the beats in the line, and he's very aware of all the grammatical things like alliteration, onomatopoeia, antithesis. He's very aware of all that. And there's a funny story between, because Laurence Olivier and John Gielgud worked together at the Old Vic or National Theatre back in the 60s and 70s. And it's almost like they had two different variations of how to speak the verse. You know, I think Laurence Olivier was kind of a bit more, I don't want to say naturalistic, but he was a lot more fluent with it. So it was more like, to be or not to be, that is the question, whether it is noble in the mind suffer the things in ours outrageous fortune. And apparently Gielgud has been on record to say, oh, Larry, he's a wonderful actor, but he speaks verse like a machine gun. And he's like, slow down, Larry, slow down, which is great. I mean, because I think that's another thing as well, is like verse is very particular with the beats in the line in a way. If you speak it too quickly, then you can kind of lose the meaning in a way, particularly if it's a significant line.
And it can feel a little bit like a nursery rhyme.
Yes. Because
you're trying to obey that rhythm too much. Whereas I think if you listen or watch it, watch something on screen and then listen to it and then follow the words, you'll have much more of a, personally, I would say that's the best way to go to help someone when they're first finding their way into Shakespeare, rather than lifting a monologue because their drama teacher has told them to, or lifting a monologue and they're not really knowing where it's from, what it's from, why they're saying what they're saying, where they've just come from as a character, where they're going to. Then they feel out of context. And that's often the case when you're auditioning people, that it feels a little bit, I don't understand the why are you saying this?
Yeah.
And often they don't know why, because they haven't investigated enough. So for me, watch it. There's no shame in watching something over and over again to have a feel of it, or listening to it over and over again and really getting a feel of the rhythms and the feelings.
Yeah. And there's another
mood.
Yeah, I mean, there's another moment, if I may sort of share one, of did you see do you remember when the Olympics came to London about 10 years ago?
2012.
Yeah, it'd be 10 years ago now. God, where's the time gone?
Yeah, 2012, my gosh.
Yeah, God. And I think the RSC did I think they did all of his works, but they put him in different contexts. So I know that Much Ado About Nothing was set in India, and one Julius Caesar was put into an African context, and it was brilliant. And thankfully, it was recorded and sort of adapted for film. Gregory Duran, wonderful man. And when the actor, whose name I can't remember, but when he did Mark Antony's speech, "Let's slip the dogs of war," and just the particular way that he did it is like this battle cry and this screaming for revenge and everything. And you could tell he had really done the work on it. And this, if anyone who knows the play or doesn't know the play, it's a moment where he's seen his like closest friend or closest advisor's body been mauled to death. And of course, it's based on Julius Caesar's actual assassination. And that speech, it just takes you from like the bottom of this pit of like, I don't know what I've seen. I don't know what I've seen, but this is what's going to happen next. And this is what's going to happen next. And this is going to happen next. And this is going to happen next. This is going to happen next. And it's just like, it's like, I remember watching it saying, bloody hell, Shakespeare, you're a smart cookie. That moment really stuck with me. And for anyone who's out there, it's on DVD. You can get it from the National Theatre or the RSC. I cannot recommend it enough. It's on digital theatre as well. If anyone has access to digital theatre, I cannot recommend that production of Julius Caesar enough. It's just fantastic. And it's so brilliant. Cool. Just one last topic I want to talk about today. Thank you for your generous amount of time you give me today, Chris. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
The final thing I want to talk about is impressions. And we signed off with yourself impersonations a few weeks ago. And I think it's really interesting to know about the secrets of impersonation, and all that comes from is the placement of various regions within the mouth in a way. So they're more accessible than people think they are. So so let's talk about your experience, or like the first time you were aware of that you could do impressions. When was that?
Oh gosh, I think a lot of kids do it, don't they? A lot of kids play. In fact, we do it. We imitate each other, and we imitate friends and family, and that's kind of the playful, creative side of us. And I think using it as a vehicle with students or with actors is incredibly creative. Less so with impersonations than with impressions. So an impression is a direct relation to the person that you are doing. An impersonation takes the areas that are salient and makes them large. So there are two different ways of looking at it. So for me, an impression is a direct correlation between the original person and the person that you're trying to imitate as superbly as you possibly can. And that's obviously listening skills, observation skills, and then of course all of the work of whether it's accent or placement or lip movement or slight stutter, whatever it is, it kind of helps create this almost direct version of the original person. So if you think about Meryl Streep playing Margaret Thatcher, and Michael Sheen, who's done a wonderful job as both Tony Blair and Brian Clough, these are fantastic. And one of my ex-students, Mark Pickering, played a wonderful young version of Steve Buscemi's character in Boardwalk Empire. And for me, it's getting absolutely every aspect so perfect. One of my other students, ex-students, Peter Groom, does an amazing impersonation of Marlene Dietrich, and he's on at the Wilton Music Hall in London in May. An absolute superb, and he's obviously gone all over the world with this work. And for me, a lot of people think it's about the outside in, and that would be that's an easy assumption to make, that it is about looking the external of that individual and then coming in, outward coming in. But actually, unless you truly are really working with that impression through listening skills and observation skills, you can't really do the work very well. It becomes then the impersonation, rather than a direct impression. And an impression is that kind of seal of impressioning, that kind of impression onto something that's almost a carbon copy of the original. And that's what I like to work with, because then it's superb. When you see it, it's absolutely superb. And your Alan Turing, Benedict Cumberbatch was actually lovely to watch.
Oh, thank you.
But it's really nice to see this in action. And I like I think that can be really helpful for students, because you don't know where your work is going to take you.
Yeah.
And often I always find it interesting that directors who might have come from completely different backgrounds, may never have trained as an actor, may not know, but they may be able to say, oh, like that person in, or like Margaret Thatcher, you're able to go, I know what to do, I know how to do, I know, and I call it the OLAR, observation, listening, authentic accent work, because it's all of those things that combined, it brings it all nicely together. But I love that work because I think it gives students, for me, it gives students a confidence that perhaps they hadn't been aware of before. I don't know how you might have felt. I'm making assumptions, Ollie, but you might have hated every minute of it.
No, not at all. No, I love doing. Well, I tried doing impersonations, impressions, sorry, of people. I was a big fan of Tommy Cooper. Great. Obviously, I was too late to kind of see it, but I grew up watching his stuff, and then you just hear his voice over and over again. It's an infectious voice, and you can't help but just sort of have a go at it. I'm not going to do it on here now because I make a fool out of myself, but that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just when I watch things now, particularly when I'm watching something last night with Cornish accents and stuff like that, and that's a really tricky one. I think it's trying to find I find it towards the back of the throat, and I'm going to do a little bit now. I'll make myself look silly, but he goes, what's a good line? Purer than Cornish oak or something like that. The back of the it's all right there at the back.
RN, yeah, and the tongue's quite high and back.
Yeah, Cornish oak right there. I felt the tongues go up there. It was great. And so yeah, that's pretty good. And you also have another one of your students, I'm not sure if you mentioned him already, so apologies if you had, but who does very good impressions on YouTube. I can't remember his name, but he does.
Luke Kempner,
that's the one.
I don't know how much he does now, but he did a fantastic series called Downstairs at Downton, and he did all of the characters from Downton Abbey.
Yes.
And I believe that Julian Fellows gave him the right to be able to use that term, Downton. And he did a one-man show, and it was amazing to watch him do all of these voices live and be able to switch them on. And I always think that that's lovely to see. It's lovely to see students doing so well, and it's lovely to see that the work that we might have explored in class in a small way had a bigger impact for people outside long after they've left.
Of course, absolutely. You're doing some great stuff, and as I said at the top of the episode, there's like a tidal wave of information, but it was smorgasbord, but it all went in, nothing went out. That's what I want to stress. So yeah, just got two more questions, if I may, before we finish up today. I'd love to talk to you about the kind of spiritual aspect. I find your work very kind of spiritual in a way, because the yoga and the Tai Chi and everything, but you talk a lot about the throat chakra a lot, and I'd love to hear more about the kind of spirit. Well, I feel do correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a spiritual element to the throat chakra and everything that kind of surrounds your practice. Is that something that you've felt along the way? I
think that might be what you're receiving, which is great.
Yeah.
But the caveat is that I would not say that I teach anything spiritual.
Okay.
just to be quite clear.
Oh, sure.
Because I do the throat, because I do the chakras through the yin yoga. So we play with the different chakras as we're working on through the yoga. The throat chakra for me is the throat area, and the chakra means energy. And really the Vishuddha is the throat chakra in Sanskrit, and it just means pure or purification. And for me, when this throat chakra is really clear, or clean, it represents good communication, speaking clearly, speaking effectively. That doesn't mean to say, so you're not woolly, you're not around the edges, you're not sort of like finding your way there. you're being quite direct. That doesn't mean to say that you're being aggressive with it, but it associates itself with the mouth, the teeth, the thyroid, the cervical, neck, the shoulders, the vocal folds, the trachea into your lungs, and the arm. So it actually affects all of this area. And as a consequence, that's why it's quite useful to work on body work, because then you're releasing areas that will feed into this area, feed into the throat chakra. And so for me, I'm always aware of what the impact that the throat or the voice can have. And that may be that some people might suffer with shyness. And so my work is trying to release the throat chakra in order to make them feel less shy or withdrawn.
Yeah.
But for others, it can be the opposite. It can be excessive speaking. I'm in danger of that. So sometimes I have to switch myself off, and I will say to my partner, I will say, I'm resting my pipes. Too much. It can associate itself with not telling the truth, or unable to listen. So for me, that's why I try not to allow my own beliefs to infiltrate the work. But of course, on some level, because of the style of practice that I use, then no doubt there will be some elements where people might feel certain things, so that spiritual element might come in, but that's not the actual aim.
Okay.
But releasing the throat chakra and releasing energy, because chakras are just wheels of energy, throughout the entire body, and and sometimes they may be held, and so that's why we do a lot of body work in my practice, probably, but less so in other teachers' work, other voice teachers' work. But I feel that if the body is bound, then the voice will be bound.
Yeah.
Hope that makes makes sense.
No, again, it did. No, absolutely.
Here's my throat chakra working. Speaking too much.
No, not at all. No. It's I think it's good to clear up that that's my sort of take from it and everything, and that other people have their own opinions and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's just my perspective, everything, and of course other people's ideas are there and they're perfectly valid as well. And so that's good to clear up. But it's really interesting to hear about my take on it, but the spiritual dynamics of connecting the body together and feeling the energy and then releasing that into the room. And I think that's a lot about, we did a lot of work with also Grania Byrne, who's also a teaching fellow at GSA, about Michael Chekhov and the radiating out from that.
Absolutely.
Enter and stuff like that.
Myself, I include, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. Yin yoga's been going on for thousands of years. Same, throat chakras and, Tai Chi, thousands of years. I'm actually learning from the masters and keeping that kind of feeling, if you like, that energy going.
Good stuff. It's great. And then final thing I want to talk to you today about is, for final question, is your books and your research and stuff like that. For kind of a few questions everyone really. Is there one in the works?
There's one in the pipe.
One in the pipe, yeah. What's it like writing a book and everything? And how was it? I'll start with that one. What's it like putting all your ideas down into one sort of journal that goes into this, that's published?
Well, actually, it was a long time coming. I've been making notes in little tiny books for ages. And it's only when you develop your practice and you actually know what your practice is.
Yeah.
So me knowing about the yin yoga and the Tai Chi, I know what my practice is now. Before that, I was a teacher that taught voice, but I have a practice now. And as a consequence, I'm able to know what it is. but it took it probably took 15 years.
Wow.
Before I actually sat down and wrote, and I just sent a book proposal, and I had several offers, so I chose one.
Hey.
So that was Voice and Speech for Musical Theatre, but that was because I had not seen a voice book that was for students that were engaged, or people that were engaged in musical theatre. There were singing books and singing actor, but nothing that really registered the difficulty that a musical theatre performer has, which is working through the body in very intense ways, in dance and core strength, which actually has an impact then on voice, and how to release the breath. So then I took my voice journey, then ended up working with the musical theatre quite a lot in order to ascertain what their problems were, in order to solve them, in order for them to be better people once they reach the third year and beyond. And as a consequence, that helped the practice. So if you like, I was learning from the students, which then informed my practice, which means I was able to then write the book. So, I'm a sponge, if you like. And hence me now going on training on viewpoints and Laban efforts. So stuff that I already know and stuff that's already part of my practice, but I want to delve much deeper. Because then what I'll do is the book, The Voice and Speech for Actors, will be looking at Laban efforts, viewpoints, Michael Chekhov's work, and weaving the voice work through each of those methodologies.
Wow.
So it's it'll be the same. It will be the same guiding principles, which is do it first, understand it, then practice it. For me, I don't like to know. I'm not a very good person at reading something and knowing it. I have to do it, feel it in my body, feel it in my voice. Then I understand it. Then I can practice it. So that's how I tend to learn. So that's how I teach, and that's how I write. So I write in that same way. So each chapter is all about the feel it first, understand it, then practice it.
Fantastic. And you'll have a trilogy out probably next year.
well I'll have the Voice and Speech for Actors out, but then there'll be, I don't know what's next after that. Maybe who knows.
Well, we look forward to that. Well, me especially. I look forward to reading that. Right. Yeah, I think that's all my questions about Chris. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking me through your journey, and again, just learning so much from you since September, and learned stuff today about the trick with the candle, and just avoid all kinds of bad things for the voice and stuff like that.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Ollie, and it's so nice to go on this journey actually myself. It's funny to talk about these things, really. When you are doing the work, you don't realize the impact that it has actually. So it's been a pleasure, A, to teach you, and B, to talk to you.
Oh, very kind of you. No, thank you so much for your time, and you're doing some really great stuff. And just keep going, keep on going, which I'm sure you will. But I look forward to the book. And this is great, guys. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast. And so if you just hang on the call, Chris, I'll say goodbye to you one-to-one. I'll stop recording, and then we'll go from there. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and I'll be back soon.